subtraction from my bank account for sure.
It doesn't take the smartest student to find X in this problem.
At least 300, 350 at least.
Do you have that money?
No.
Hoping it gets worked out in the end.
I'm trying to get as much family and friend support as I can to fund my classroom.
Finding that solution. We should also add both those teachers work at Title I schools, which means they don't want to put that additional financial burden on.
Good afternoon. I'm Chaplain Denny from the South Carolina National Guard. Og Mandino, the successful salesman and author, said, "I will not allow yesterday's successes to lull me into today's complacency, for this is the great foundation of failure." If you're a praying person, I invite you to please pray with me. Gracious Lord, as the storm slowly passes, I pray we will remain vigilant and not let complacency take the place of sound judgment. I pray that we will continue to heed the warnings of our county and state officials so we can remain safe and continue to protect and care for our families and neighbors. Lord, may your face shine upon us and pour out your grace upon this great state. I pray all this in your mighty and precious name. Amen.
Thank you, sir. Well, just briefly, we've been lucky so far. Things have not been as bad as they could have been, although we've had a lot of rain, and it's not nearly over. One way to look at this is if we are in the second act of a 3-act play. The first act was all the rain coming primarily in the Beaufort and on up towards Charleston. And that has subsided some now, and the hurricane moved a little off the storm, and that's coming back for the second act. And that will take place up in the northern part, Myrtle Beach, Horry, and in that area, and on somewhat into the Midlands and on up northwest in the state, where we'll have heavy rains, continue to have the heavy rains. Then the third act will be after the rains are gone and all that water that has not yet finished coming through the rivers will crest and will be coming through. We may have some of that before the rain ends, but we will certainly have more of that after the rains end. That's how it always has been. So we're not nearly out of the woods yet. And of course, after the curtain's down, then that's when the cleanup takes place, and that's when a whole different phase begins. But we have been lucky. We are temporarily in a little bit of a lull. The PD is the next area, and I would urge people to remember, and if you're a newcomer, ask your neighbors, when it rained bad, when we had other hurricanes, what parts of our neighborhood flooded? What happened then? Because chances are it's going to happen again. We know where the low-lying areas are. And we'll also urge everyone to remember that after the rains are gone and when the sun comes out, we will still have a lot of rain, a lot of things in yards and around the small towns. Those waters are not necessarily clean because there's been a lot of stuff that's been going into them, from chemicals in farmlands to overrunning sewer systems and all of that. So be very careful with that. So, and also remind people, when you're on these roads and the water's coming down and the water's rising, it can rise very quickly and it can take a vehicle off a road. We've seen it happen before. And I mentioned one time in one of the storms a few years ago, as we were circling in a helicopter, we saw either 2 or 3 men sitting on the hood of a car out in a rural area on a road, and the waters were rising and going right across the road. And we circled around and were radioing back to alert others to come get them. And by the time we got around again, the water was up over the hood and they were up on the roof of the car. And by the time a swift boat got there, they were right up perched on the top getting wet when they got them off of there finally. And if the swift boat hadn't gotten there when it got there, they would have been in much deeper trouble. So help your neighbors, look out for your neighbors, look out for their pets, look out for their property. And so far we had no fatalities related to this so far, and we don't want any, but we know there's going to be a lot of cleanup to do, and we got to be very safe because This is not nearly over. We're just in the second phase of this right now. And now, John Q, National Weather Service.
Thank you, Governor. John Quayle of the National Weather Service. So Debby has strengthened some as it sits offshore, about 55 miles east-southeast of Charleston, with wind speeds now at 60 miles per hour, and it's moving northeast at only 30 miles per hour, so it's slowed down some. Debby could strengthen a bit more before making landfall as a strong tropical storm somewhere along the northern Charleston County or Georgetown County coast Thursday morning. Its greatest impacts will still be the potential for considerable flash flooding and significant long-term river flooding, as the governor had mentioned. The greatest storm total rainfall amounts so far have ranged from 9 to 17 inches across the southern part of the state, with some of the highest totals so far in areas like Colleton, Charleston, Beaufort, Jasper, Hampton, Berkeley, Dorchester, Barnwell, and Bamberg counties. We're currently seeing outer rain bands from Debby impacting the eastern half of the state. Additional rainfall amounts of 4 to 8 inches, with locally higher amounts, can still occur into Friday across the northeast part of the state, with an additional 2 to 4 inches across the rest of the state. These rain bands can still result in considerable flash flooding. Anyone traveling needs to continue to use extreme caution and avoid flooded roadways. This heavy rain will cause considerable rises on area rivers, with many going into moderate flood. Of particular concern for major flooding is the Little PD River near Gallivan's Ferry and the Edisto River near Givens Ferry. Some rivers, especially in the PD Basin, may not crest until the middle of next week. Given the strength of Debby, it's possible for areas along the immediate coast to experience tropical storm force wind gusts, with many areas inland likely to experience wind gusts of 20 to 30 miles an hour through Thursday. Fortunately, the threat for significant storm surge has ended, but minor coastal flooding is still possible across the northern portion of the South Carolina coast, mainly with the high tide cycle this evening and possibly again with the morning high tide cycle tomorrow. An isolated tornado threat still exists, but mainly near the Grand Strand. So please don't let your guard down. The direct impacts from Debby will persist into Thursday night or Friday, but the river impacts could potentially last much longer. And again, please go to weather.gov for the latest forecast information. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Kim Stenson.
Thank you, sir. Kim Stenson, the State Emergency Management Division. The State Emergency Management Operations Center remains at OPCON 1, which is our highest readiness state. And the priorities here at the State Emergency Operations Center include supporting local shelter and localized evacuation operations, maintaining the transportation lifeline, planning for possible riverine flooding, especially in the PD area, and supporting damage assessment operations. We have our personnel deployed to 9 counties to assist the local authorities throughout the operation, and we continue to closely coordinate with county emergency management officials. 25 counties right now are at some level of enhanced readiness, with 11 counties at OPCON 1, which is the highest readiness level, and 14 counties at OPCON 2, which is an enhanced readiness state. Their primary focus right now includes sheltering operations, response operations, including rescues, and possible local evacuations. No major communications issues have been reported. We do have some preliminary damage estimates from Berkeley, Charleston, and Colleton. 64 homes had damage, with a majority in Colleton County, which has 1 home destroyed and 15 with major damage. Berkeley, Colleton, and Horry counties are reporting a total of 6 businesses with some level of damage. Infrastructure damage right now is currently limited to road damage due to rain and floodwater, and damage assessments are being compiled. In the logistics area, we have fielded 207 requests. 197 of those have been completed or in progress, and there's 10 pending at the moment. Our public information phone system remains open for residents to call in with any questions, and that number again is 1-866-246-0133. In closing, we'd like to make a few recommendations. The first is to stay away from flooded areas and avoid taking on any unnecessary risks. We want to encourage everyone to continue preparing for the possibility of worsening conditions. As the governor's already mentioned, we're not over this yet. And whether that means securing your property, gathering essential supplies, or having a plan in place for a quick evacuation, proactive steps now can make a big, huge difference. One of the most effective ways the public can assist during this time is by reporting any storm damage through the South Carolina Emergency Manager mobile app. And it's not just about documenting losses, but it's also helping us direct response and resources to where they might be needed. And your reports are vital to our recovery efforts. It's also important to stay connected with reliable sources for updates. Misinformation can be dangerous as the storm itself, just as dangerous as the storm itself. So please rely on official channels, including your local emergency management and local officials, for that accurate information. And our website at scemd.org and our South Carolina Emergency Manager app continue to be excellent sources of information. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Now, Brett Howard, Federal Coordinating Official from FEMA.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. Brett Howard, Federal Coordinating Officer. As you've heard, that it appears that the impacts did not make it up to what the forecast was, which is great, right? But they're still significant. There's still damage out there. There's still a lot of homes, as you heard, homes that have been damaged. There's a lot of damage out there. And the second round, or as the governor said, the second act is about to occur. And we're anticipating additional significant damage. FEMA stands ready to continue to support the state and the governor and Director Stinson's needs on whatever they need. But as I said yesterday, I can't brag on the governor and his team that's standing behind me, Director Stinson, and the locals, to the readiness and the ability to respond and act with a disaster that is so imminent. FEMA, the federal, even though we staged a lot of equipment and a lot of personnel, we haven't been asked to do very much, if any. And that is a testament to this team behind me. The capability and the capacity of South Carolina to take care of their own is remarkable. And I can't brag on the governor, everybody behind me enough. The coordination is really, again, I can't say it enough, remarkable. But continue to be very diligent in your preparedness for this second round. We stand here ready to support the governor and any needs. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Appreciate that. Major General McCarty.
Thank you, Governor. On behalf of the soldiers, airmen, employees of the Military Department of South Carolina and our South Carolina State Guard, I want to give a quick update. We currently have approximately 300 soldiers on state active duty. We anticipate seeing about another 60 come on before the end of the day. We have approximately 60 high water vehicles that are deployed on the coast. We still have a few in the southern area. However, they will be shifting to the central or the northern conglomerate area as the day goes on. Our focus right now is still in the central coastal region, and we will be shifting those to the northern based upon the anticipated flooding in the PD. We also have some debris clearing teams that are also deployed on the coast. Our liaison officers are still deployed in 6 counties. We are continuing to work there with the local authorities to ensure the National Guard is prepared to support their needs as requested. We're also assessing what additional resources may be needed, whether it's MPs, additional engineers, or just general purpose troops to support the flooding in the PD. As it relates to our aviation assets, we stand by ready to support the needs for search and rescue and to support other needs, but that probably will not be a window capable of flying until sometime Friday. On a good news note, I mentioned yesterday that the unit that was EMAC to the state of Florida should be back to their home station or to the station in Barnville here within the hour. They will then break up and begin to move to their prospective units, and they will be prepared to be remissioned as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Secretary Justin Powell, Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Governor. Justin Powell, Secretary of DOT. Tropical Storm Debby continues to affect the state's transportation system. We have over 2,300 employees that are working round the clock to reopen roads and to assess damages. As of 11 o'clock, we had 83 roads that were closed in South Carolina. No interstates are closed. I'm pleased to report that the ramps at exit 22 and exit 33 in Jasper County have been reopened. We have 18 primary routes. Those are U.S. or SC shielded routes that are closed. Those are predominantly in Jasper, Colleton, and Dorchester counties. Happy to report we have already reopened 25 roads that had closed during the event. In the Low Country, we are shifting to a cleanup and damage assessment operation as the storm passes out from there. Our focus will be first on our primary routes, those are the SC and US shielded routes, and then we'll turn to our secondary system and focus where the traffic is. In the PD, we are preparing for the response for the second landfall of this storm. We are actively monitoring flood forecasts in the PD River Basin and its impacts on the state highway system. We do not anticipate, based on the forecast we've received, that we will need to do a lifeline operation like we did in 2018 during Hurricane Florence. SCDOT will continue to be out and about during this time. We have a lot of personnel that are out in the field right now. I encourage motorists as they come up on our crews to make sure that they give them space, to let them do their jobs, and we want to let them live, let them work.
Thank you. Director Robert Wood, Department of Public Safety.
Rob Woods, South Carolina Department of Public Safety. Currently, we have 238 state law enforcement officers working the traffic management mission. Those personnel are from the South Carolina Department of Public Safety divisions of the Highway Patrol and State Transport Police, as well as from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, and the South Carolina Department of Parole, Probation, and Pardon. The numbers tonight, that's for the day shift numbers. We'll have a similar number out tonight, about 187, for a total of 425 law enforcement officers that will be assigned from the Midlands to the coast over the next 24 hours. With regard to our calls for service, yesterday during the Tuesday operational period, we had 640 calls for service. That compares with 307 calls for service last year at this time. Now, those calls for service primarily are coming from collisions, disabled motorists, and blocked roadways due to downed trees, power lines, and flooding. For the last 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, our calls for service total were 1,191, and that compares with 651 during the same period last year. So you can see that our calls for service are up substantially. Just in closing, a reminder, please, if you don't have to travel, don't travel at all. Stay off the roads, and if you do have to travel, make sure that you're exercising additional caution, especially on those wet roads. Please make sure you slow down. Thank you, Governor.
Thanks, sir. Chief Mark Keel, State Law Enforcement Division.
Good afternoon, Mark Keel, Chief of SLED, ESF 13 partners, SLED, DNR, Triple P, SCDC, South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy. Agents and officers are currently supporting a number of missions in South Carolina. We have 41 agents or officers assigned to Troops 5, 6, and 7 with the Highway Patrol in helping them with traffic management. We have 4 agents or officers that are currently working directed patrol in Dorchester County. I have personally been in touch with all the sheriffs along the coastal counties, including those border counties to the coast, and making sure that they had the resources they needed as far as law enforcement. Many of the southern counties have gone back to normal operations from the standpoint of law enforcement. We're putting our emphasis now in the PD area, Marlboro, Dillon, Marion, Horry counties, anticipating again the Tropical Storm Debby making landfall and what type rain amounts we end up in the PD area. But we stand ready to support our local law enforcement counterparts wherever they needed. We have the resources in place and available, along with all of our state partners. That's all I have.
Thank you, Chief. Director Mike Leach, DSS.
Thank you, Governor. Our DSS mass care teams, along with our partners at the Red Cross and the Salvation Army, continue to be deployed at emergency operations centers and shelters across the state in support of county needs. We are working with counties along the coast and river basins to lean forward in anticipation of the projected river flooding concerns and potential shelter openings in the PD area. As of 1 p.m., South Carolina currently has 12 total shelters open across the state. There's a total population of 107 citizens in shelters. At this time yesterday, we had 11 shelters open with 85 citizens. We actually went up to about 17, and now we're back down to 12. So as this thing is, as the storm is moving, shelters are opening and closing really fast, and citizens are utilizing it and not needing it after a certain amount of time. We're working with the EMD and our partners to be prepared with our teams on potential locations across the PD and potential shelters that are on standby to open. And a couple reminders here. Pets, for people with pets, we want to reiterate the messaging that people should utilize the hurricane guide found at www.hurricane.sc pets or reach out to their county emergency operations centers or emergency shelter if they need to evacuate their pets. They will receive accommodations either on site or through connections with the county mass care team. No one should ever have to worry about having to evacuate and leave a pet behind or be afraid to evacuate because their pet might be turned away. If there is flooding and you need to evacuate, and please bring your pet. Try to also bring items, food, water, pet food and water, carrier, leash, medical records, identification. And if you do have to evacuate yourself in the shelter, your important documents, comfort items, medications, things like that. One other reminder for our early care and education, child care facilities, if you have an active emergency, we do have a hotline so you can report damage, report closures, and request to expand capacity to care for children from facilities that may be affected, and the number is 1-888-825-7174. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Myra Reese, Department of Environmental Services.
Thank you, Governor, and good afternoon. A quick update from the Department of Environmental Services. Our priorities remain the same. Close communications with our local emergency officials, communications with our dam owners, and coordinating with EMD, the Governor's Office, and other state agencies. Starting with dams, yesterday I know you recall that I reported that there was one unregulated dam breach in Colleton County. There have been no dam breaches reported overnight or this morning, so that's really good news. What I want to emphasize, and you've already heard this, is that we're not done with the storm. We're not out of harm's way yet. So it's so important for our dam owners to continue to stay vigilant and observe current conditions at their dam. I want to really emphasize too, I know our FEMA partner emphasized this, that the coordination that's taking place right now is just remarkable. And I have to say again, our local emergency officials are doing an amazing job. And we are providing them assistance along with DOT. And if there's any questions, we're working up different scenarios. You know, we got to not only be thinking about individual dams, but a series of dams as well. And so that coordination and just planning just keeps continuing throughout this storm. So I guess from the next steps for us as far as dam safety after the storm passes by is we think that we'll be ready Friday morning to put teams together to go out and do post-storm assessments. And that's going to be really critical information for us that tells us how they fared and if it really put some of the dams in a condition that we need to require some actions. Probably we'll be doing assessments of several hundreds of dams, and we plan to have those completed by the weekend. Drinking water and wastewater facilities, we're not aware of any impacts to drinking water systems to this point. Wastewater, we continue to get some reports of sanitary sewer overflows, mainly in the low country in the PD area, and they're making the appropriate public notifications for that. And then as far as coastal impacts, we haven't received any reports of damage to structures or property along the coast. As I mentioned yesterday, we know that we'll probably be doing some work at Edisto, and we'll continue to send some post-storm assessment teams from our coastal office out on Friday as well. That's it. Thank you.
Director Emily Farr, Labor Licensing Regulation.
Thank you, sir. Just a brief update on the state's search and rescue efforts. We've continued to work very closely with the local fire chiefs and the counties to make sure that they have all of their needs met. I'm happy to say that at this point we have not had to do any swiftwater rescues or rescues by the state teams. It's not to say that the local level teams may have performed rescues within the local areas, but the state has not needed to do so. We have done 2 assisted evacuations with the state task force. One team in the city of Charleston assisted EMS with preparing a patient for transport and another civilian to get out of a flooded area. At this point, we're really, as you've heard from many before me, we're looking at moving assets and resources north toward more of the PD region throughout the day today, looking at what resources might be needed there for the next act of this storm. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Andrew Bateman, Office of Regulatory Staff.
Thank you, Mr. Governor. Andrew Bateman, South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff. Good afternoon. As of right now, we stand at approximately 2,716 storm-related outages statewide. However, as the storm moves north, we do expect the PD region to be significantly impacted and are expecting widespread power outages. After speaking with utility representatives, I know that their crews are working diligently around the clock to restore power as it is safe to do so. However, please be mindful that as flooding occurs, it may impact their ability to restore power and may actually cause some delays. Thank you, Mr. Governor.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I want to recognize, of course, we have our signers with us today again, Holly May and Josie McDaniel Burkett. We appreciate that. And also, you need to know that we had with us earlier today Admiral Doug Schofield of the Coast Guard, and also his Master Chief Gibson, that was with us for a good while and sat through the meetings with us and are fully on board and ready to help. Does anyone have any questions?
A question for John about, we just keep talking about the PD, and a lot of people might be a little worried about the impacts out there. Can you elaborate a little bit more about when it comes to what folks might be seeing? Is that a little bit of wind? I know we're talking about the rain and obviously the flooding, but kind of drill down a little bit more on what we might be seeing out there.
Yeah, we're already seeing those rain bands moving back on shore. We had a little bit of a lull this morning in the precipitation, but that's already started to redevelop and spread inland. As Debbie gets a little bit closer to the coast, the winds will likely pick up later today, tonight, into tomorrow morning. Tropical storm force wind gusts, 45 to maybe up to 55 or 60 miles an hour are certainly possible right along the immediate coast as it moves onshore. But we think farther inland we won't see winds quite that high. We still think the rainfall is going to be a threat. It may not be as catastrophic as what we were saying, but we still think as these rain bands develop, they could sit over the same area for long periods of time, produce a lot of rainfall and a lot of flooding. So really just need to be mindful that the threat isn't over. It's still going to be there. We're fortunate the storm surge, the storm, it's just not, the way the wind fields are, the way the tide cycle is, we just don't expect the big surge from the storm. So we're very fortunate that way. But the rivers up there take a long time to respond. It's very flat. So the rain that falls will go into the rivers, and then also the rain that falls into North Carolina, which will be considerable, will take some time to work its way down into the state. And that's why we don't expect those rivers to crest probably until the middle of next week at some point.
More questions? Yes, sir.
Governor, you just mentioned speaking with the Coast Guard this morning. Do you know if the Coast Guard has had to make any rescues or been involved in those situations?
I don't think they've made any rescues. They are fully on standby and ready to help with manpower and boats and helicopters, etc. Question? Yes, sir.
Question for Director Powell. There was a report earlier today that exit of 526 is indefinitely closed in North Charleston. Are there any other locations that have been damaged by more than just flooding and might be indefinitely closed? I think that was a
Sure. So yeah, there was a drainage outfall that had some impact on that one. But what I would say is right now we're in that stage where a lot of the water is receding. So we've got to see where the those damages are. And so once we do that, that's part of our activity over the next several days, particularly as the rain stops, the water starts receding, we'll go through. We will take a look at the damages out there, if they can be done by our crews or if we need to bring in a contractor to repair them. But we'll work on it expeditiously, and we basically have 12 assessment crews that are ready to go, basically go throughout the state, look at those damages, and to make determinations quickly.
More questions?
I have one for Adjutant General McCarty. Just when we talk about moving resources to the PD region, obviously there's been a history with the town of Nichols suffering some substantial flooding over the past couple of years with those storms. Any concerns about that this go around? Are you guys putting resources in those areas specifically?
We'll be repositioning high water vehicles in the Nichols area, and probably our debris clearing teams will be working with the local authorities to ensure that we have the resources that they need and are monitoring the areas of concern that they would have. And if there is a need to bring in additional equipment, whether it's what we have in the state or to utilize Title X assets, we are in a position to make those calls and have those resources brought to South Carolina.
Thank you. Director Ben Duncan, can you comment on that?
Yes, for the town of Nichols, we have a couple of infrastructure projects going on, stormwater drainage, and we have a home buyout project going on there. So we are well aware of the problems in Nichols that we're trying to fix.
How many homes have we fixed or renovated or removed?
Total from all the previous storms, 3,440 homes, and we have a few more to go, and we should be complete by the fall. And we have some plans, and we have at least 25 plans and studies for other areas that don't quite understand their flooding issue, and we're trying to address those flooding issues now.
That's the Office of Resilience. Questions? Any more? Yes, sir.
For Director Reese with Environmental Services, it's my understanding that earlier in the year, the department applied for FEMA funds through the National Dam Safety Program. I'm wondering, particularly if after the storm, you mentioned kind of post-mortem dam inspections, if there is a need to make significant repairs, do you know any sense of the timeline, details of accessing those federal funds?
I know those funds are available, I believe, for high hazard dams, and I think we already have some funding, and folks have already started to look at applying for some of those funds, but we're always very appreciative of additional funds that come in, and certainly we'll be considering that when we assess the condition of the dams, the high hazards.
Do you know how much funding has come in so far?
I do not, but I will get that number to you if you'll follow up with me afterwards. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
One, I think this would be Director Stenson, but again, it seems like, well, no fatalities reported, which is good news. Have there been any injuries or?
We've had none reported yet, but sometimes that comes in fairly slow.
Sure.
But nothing on our radar right now.
Okay, great.
Okay. Any more? Thank you very much.
Tonight, homeowners in Cabarrus County are asking where's the money after opening their latest tax bills.
County commissioners adopted a new budget that includes an increased property tax rate. Tonight, WCNC's Charlotte's Miles Harris speaking to those homeowners left with sticker shock tonight.
$2,000 on a 1,000 square foot property was pretty high, I thought.
Nick Sanchez is like many others in Cabarrus County, seeing the results of the new property tax that now sits at 57.6 cents per $100 of assessed value.
Yeah, we just pulled out our bill today, or maybe a couple days ago, and realized that it went up about